Okay, perfect. So let's get started. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. I am so excited to welcome you all to South Asian Clay Collective's Chai and Conversations. Chai and Conversation is a free, open to all speaker series where we invite inspiring artists to share their stories, knowledge, and their creative journeys over a cup of chai. Today, I have a little cup of chai here. Um, my name's Tayyiba Ahmed, and I am a ceramic artist based in Austin, Texas, and I'm one of the co-founders of South Asian Clay Collective. Now, for those of you who are new here and may not know who we are and what we do, South Asian Clay Collective emerged from a shared desire for connection through the language of clay. There is power in community, and within the diaspora, the ache of belonging runs deep. So, we created this platform for all the South Asian ceramic artists, wherever they are, whether they're living in the diaspora or in South Asia, or for anyone who's seeking community and connection. It's free to join, and we organize virtual talks, meetups to bring people together. We also have a group chat where members share their work, ask questions, exchange resources, and support one another. Now, while this platform is designed to unite and connect South Asian artists, we also believe that our collective knowledge, wisdom, and experiences are strengthened and celebrated with each new generation. So, in informative virtual talks like this one, for example, they're always open and free for anyone who can benefit from them. So if you've shared this Zoom link with someone you care about and they're joining us today, thank you so much because today's session is going to be truly special and informative. We are absolutely thrilled to have the amazing Kristen Kieffer with us today. Kristen is a studio potter based in Massachusetts, known for her beautiful work that brings elegance and sophistication to every day. Today, Kristen will be sharing lessons she's learned from her mentor, John Glick, about physical health and ergonomics for potters and how to reduce injuries in the studio. Christian mentioned that if she hadn't learned healthy throwing techniques and safe studio practices from John, she might not still be working with clay today. She highly recommends reading two of John Glick's articles. One of them is called To Sciatica and Back. That was written in 1987. And the second one is called Down the Spinal Canal. And that one was written in 2001. I will be posting links to both of those articles in the chat as soon as I'm done with the introduction. So you have access to those both articles, and I hope you read them. Please share it with others also who can benefit from them. Before I completely hand it over to Kristen, I just want to share a couple of quick reminders. After Kristen's presentation, we will have some time for Q&As, but throughout her demonstration, please feel free to type in your questions. So while she's doing the demo, we can address those questions. But at the end, you can come off mute and ask questions directly. But I would highly recommend just typing in questions throughout. Um, Feel free to take notes, but don't worry, today's session is being recorded. You will receive a replay in your inbox, and you're welcome to share it with anyone who might benefit from it later on. With that, thank you so much once again for joining us, and I am so excited for this Giant Conversations. Um, Let me unmute Kristen. Let's see if this works. Welcome, Kristen.
Good
Good
morning, everyone.
morning. Good morning.
Thank you all for coming to my studio so that I can talk to you about being healthy in your studio. Thank you, Tava. I appreciate the introduction and the invitation very much to be here. Talking about Working healthy is actually more fun for me than talking about making things. So I'm delighted to be here and hope I can help a little bit. I wanted to start off before I actually introduce my throwing setup, just to talk a little bit about my injury history and a little bit of my instruction in learning health things. So I realized that, and as Tava said, that John Glick is paramount in my mentorship of learning to work healthy, as well as kind of almost everything I do in my studio. Um, very little of where I've been educated and done residencies or any of that did working healthy or taking care of your body ever come up. And I can only think of two instances in my career. And I'm 53, so when I was in school was a lot longer ago. So hopefully some things have changed. So the first time I remember something coming up was my very first throwing instructor. I took throwing at a community college is when I began ceramics in 1992. Um, he had threw very large pieces and had wrist problems. And so I learned to throw by holding my wrists or my hands in line with my wrist when I center. So very much centering like this versus ever doing this. So hyperextending wrists is something I've always taught to never do. Um, and I when I teach, I always say that if I say always and never, I mean it. So never do this. Um, but that was just a very matter of fact thing. Like my instructor said, I had problems. You're going to learn to throw this way. And so that was just part of what I learned. Then the only other time I remember something coming up was when I was in graduate school. I had a graduate professor who would talk about tingling in his hands because he used to wedge hundreds of pounds of clay in the morning before throwing very large vessels all day. So I don't do that either. I'll talk a little bit later in my PSA that the articles that were mentioned earlier that John wrote, I talk about being purposefully inefficient. And that's a good example of not wedging a lot of clay all at once. So that's another thing I don't do. So working with John was bracketed by these two kind of random, like I experienced this, so don't do that. But that's the only time anything ever came up. In undergraduate school, it was expected that you would mix clay. So that means picking up 50-pound bags, mixing hundreds of pounds of clay at a time. My senior year would include mixing clay, still being seated to throw, and then loading my own kilns, which weren't car kilns or anything like that. And at the time, kiln shelves were about 22 pounds. So, kind of extending this way into a kiln. And that's when my back went out the first time. Again, I was 22 years old, worst pain I've ever experienced in my life. And I wasn't even doing anything when it happened. I just worked out at the gym. I think I was putting my shirt on and my back went out. And I think I either had a slip disc or a pinched sciatic nerve, but didn't have health insurance, wasn't diagnosed, was just on bed rest for a couple of weeks. And I don't remember thinking about it again after that, other than, oh, I hope that never happens again. Um, After that, it happens that I got a job in Dearborn, Michigan. Yay, Dearborn. Working at a historical pottery where I was an intern and had to throw 200 pots a month for my internship. I've never thrown so many pots before or since. But because it was a historical pottery and we were throwing for visitors, we were standing to work so that they could see us and ask questions. So that was the first time I stood to throw. That was 1995. And in preparing for this, I realized, oh my God, that's 30. I've been standing to throw for 30 years. So it's funny to me that like I've been standing to throw for that long, and this is still a new concept. Like every year, potters are getting injured by staying seated, and this is like a new thing that comes up every once in a while. So again, glad to be here to talk about it. Um, so working at Greenfield Village put me in proximity to John Glick. He lived just a little bit north of there. I applied to be his assistant and got that, and that was 1996 to 7. And so I had started to stand just incidentally prior to working with him. But again, working with him is what enabled me to stay healthy to keep doing this. I would either have maybe become a hand builder or probably left clay altogether. Uh, um, so I really do credit him with keeping me safe and healthy. And so part of his assistantship is he wound up calling it an artist in residency at one point, but he started taking on assistants when he injured his back. And I was looking at when he wrote his articles and stuff and realized he was he was he was 48 when he first had sciatic issues. So again, I was 22. I mean, there's no rhyme or reason as to when somebody's going to get injured or how long it might take, how long you might be able to get away with things. And he injured his back at 48 after having been seated throwing for 22 years. It only took me 3. um, so working with him was very much about, we mixed clay together. We packed his large pots together. It was the assistantship was learning how to be healthy for me while helping him in his studio and be healthy for him. So while he was standing at his wheel to throw, I was standing at the exact same setup. All of his assistants had the exact same setup. We were all required to throw standing. And I had already had practice doing that. So it was just a lovely opportunity I knew I wanted to be a studio potter, to work with a studio potter. So that's kind of a side conversation of, who we have access to and who we can learn from. I also realized, this is kind of an aside, that I've worked with about 16 different mentors, from different schooling to working with John, that kind of stuff. About 16 people, only one woman, and that was only for a semester. And I didn't learn to throw, like I never saw her throw or do anything like that. Only one person of color and only one person from the LGBTQ community. So again, that says something about when I was in school and stuff. And again, I hope things like that have changed, but I think who we work with, who we have access to, can very much frame what we learn and what we take in. And I do think, like, if I had worked with more women, maybe that would have led to more thought about how I use my body. One example I use, talking about mostly working with men, is that, excuse me, in undergrad, I had learned to throw a certain way. So I have pretty pointy fingers. And my instructor noticed that and said, "So you always do that?" And I said, "Yeah, because my fingertips are little, and I find that holding a sponge works better." And he looked at my fingers. He's like, "Oh yeah, you do have really small fingers." I mean, his fingertip was the size of 3 of mine. So again, I mean, that's a weird example, but who you learn from can affect how you do something, from just a technique to being healthy. So just some observations that I was thinking about in preparing for this. So that's a little bit of my history of injury. My back continued to go out kind of once a year for 10 years. So from the first time as a senior in undergrad through graduate school. And it really only stopped going out when I stopped mixing clay. Buying clay was huge, but that wasn't something that was, I mean, you just didn't do that. It was considered a little taboo, I think, which is just stupid. And switching to having access to car kilns, so not having to lean into a kiln. The invention of advancer shelves, those really thin shelves, was huge. And then obviously standing to throw, all of those things. And then just be more consistent with core exercises, made it so that that wasn't something that happened anymore. So that's kind of a little bit about me. So now I wanted to bring you over to my throwing setup, or give me just a little view of my studio here. So this is my Soldner wheel that I had I've had since 1997. I bought, it's the same kind of wheel that John had. So I got it when I um, after I finished working with him, I did a residency. And so the advantage about this wheel is that it has a tripod. Um, I did a little illustration for you guys. It's tripoded this way. So if this is the wheel head, there's just a lot more space underneath here for my legs and feet. And you can kind of see that it's very inelegantly up on cinder blocks and bricks. And I've carried these same cinder blocks and bricks to like, I don't know, 8 different states and 6 different studios. And it's just ridiculous. John had a very lovely welded legs, and I just have never done that. Most people have Brent or Shimpo wheels. So it's tripoded the opposite way. So the leg is right in front of the wheel head. And having taught places or done workshops where they elevate the wheel for me, having that front leg right there elevated on a cinder block means that you hit your knees. So what I would do is, if you're interested in trying to elevate your wheel, is orient it this way so that you're standing here, and then the what I call the deck, where you put your water bucket and stuff, is off to the side, and you have a little bit more room here. So hopefully that makes sense. Um, so again, so this is me easily sliding into my backrest situation. So this is, my husband made this, but this is the design that John created. And the idea is to have this cushion that's kind of underneath that lifts your butt, little butt lift there. You're not sitting, but you're leaning. And then this cushion here goes in your lumbar region. So it's super comfortable, just leaning back. It's very comfortable. You want this to be a tight fit. This is a tighter fit than it used to be, if you know what I mean, but I'm really close to the wheel head. The wheel head, my bat system is about belly button height, a little higher even. That's what you want. I see people throwing elevated on Instagram videos, and there's so many people that their wheel is still low and they're still hunched over. So it's very important that this be up this high. I have notes, so I remember to tell you guys everything. So by using the backrest, all of my leverage for throwing is from pushing back this way versus your forearms on your thighs. So that takes practice. I mean, all of us have learned to throw. So at some point you can throw it all. So learning to stand is going to take a new kind of practice. I've been throwing standing for way longer than seated, but you just kind of get used to, using your rib cage. I do have my forearms on my splash pan sometimes, but again, most of the leverage is exerted from that backwards way. So the other thing I wanted to say is simply elevating your wheel isn't always just the best answer. So I've definitely worked in studios where I taught community class, adult community classes for 20 years, and the instructor wheel was elevated, but there was no backrest. You kind of have to have a wall for that, and the wheels were in the middle of the room. So I would teach kind of all day, just freestanding at the wheel, and come home and my back would bother me. So simply elevating the wheel isn't always going to work for everyone. So if you think about me leaning here, my foot is up on the pedal. If I'm freestanding with my foot up on the pedal, what that means is my hips are torqued because this foot is lifted and this leg is not. And that is bad. I have friends, we all have so many friends that have had so many injuries. So I have friends that I'm standing to throw, but they don't have a way to keep their hips even. So then they have back problems. So one solution for that, there's a couple of solutions for that. Obviously, my preference is the backrest. Even with the backrest, John would throw like half the morning with his pedal on one side and then flip the pedal to the other side. I refer to him as being ambifooted. I can't do that. I do it sometimes if I'm throwing bigger things. I'll use my left foot. But so that's one answer, that if your foot is up an hour or two, then you switch, then you're evening things out. But just always being aware of your hip positioning. If one side of your hip is leaning more than the other, being level. So my answer for that, for me, I've had this, John made this for me, this wedge piece of wood. That's where my left foot goes. And so that makes my left foot mimic my right foot up on the pedal. So that's what keeps my hips level. I am aware that by having both my feet kind of lightly lifted, I want to be aware of not locking my knees. And I'm at an age where now I'm having knee issues, just life stuff. But I always try to keep my knees a little bit soft when I'm standing like this, so not locked. But again, by having that and nice and even, comfortable. Some people prefer to have their pedal up on the deck, so they're using their hand to shift, basically. I don't like that. I like keeping both my hands on the clay while I'm working. Um, that's just my preference, not having to take my hand off for the pedal. So that is one way of working that would alleviate your foot being up. So that's important. Floor pedal, and then the height again. That's very important. Again, some potter's wheel manufacturers have started providing legs, but again, they're almost always too short. So just paying attention to working at a height that you're not hunched over. You happen to be standing, but you're still hunched over. And I do want to say that there's no answer for everybody. I throw, again, since I've been standing to throw for 30 years, my work has changed tremendously over that time. So in the early years, I used to throw a lot more than I do now. And this has always worked well for me. Now I throw like maybe part of a day and then decorate for a week. So if you're somebody who throws a lot and have feet or leg issues, maybe being this standing isn't quite right. Maybe you need to be a little bit more perched or something. I do always recommend when I've taught community classes or teach workshops, the very least having your wheel up on a brick or two so that you're not completely bent over. So there's a lot of different modifications that might be better for you. We all have different maladies, proportions, all of those things come into play. Understanding what your workflow is like and definitely impacts what way of throwing might work best for you. So it did seem like it might help to see, I'm just going to center something so that you guys can see this in action, I guess. So I'm going to start by I'm going to start here so you can see me from this angle, and then I'm going to move it to the front so you can see my hands. So you can see what I was talking about, where I keep my wrists in line. So if there's any questions at this point, I'm happy to take some. So other things that, so again, leverage back, my wrists are completely in line. Standing, it's even harder to do this anyway. When you're seated, it's easy to have your elbow in your hip and use this to leverage throwing. And again, that is, I can't emphasize enough how horrible that is for your wrists. So it's just even harder to do standing. So when I center, my fingers are overlapped this way, and you can see how upright I am. John would even, he would, I'm aware that like I even kind of look down a little bit more or lean a little bit more than I should. He always stayed straight. And this is when you could have a mirror here so that you can look there to see the silhouette, so you're really not leaning. And I do try to, if I've leaned this way, so some of one piece, and I try to lean this way, again compensating a little bit. But again, I'm not even using my forearms on the splash pan. All my leverage is from the backrest. I think I use the splash pans. This is when you don't really know what you do until you pay attention to it. Maybe I don't. No, there I am. To do that, I am. Um, Let me just move the camera front.
So, Kristen, there are a couple of questions
Yeah.
come in the chat box as you um, set up the camera and you go back on your wheel. I'm going to read a couple of questions here. Um, let's see. Can you tell me the name of the wheel one more time, the one that you have?
It's probably called something else now. It used to be, Paul Soldner was a ceramic artist, and it used to be called a Soldner wheel.
Okay.
It might be it might be manufactured by Bluebird now,
Okay.
and they were on the pricier end when I got mine. So I don't know how they compared to current wheels. I mean, I don't think there's anything particularly special about it, other than it just allows for that kind of space. Um, the pedal is a little bit different. It's a lot more chunky. So putting it up here would be weird if you wanted to do that. But that's why I showed that illustration of playing with turning your whatever wheel you might already have on a different angle is a little disorienting at first, but might work just as well. Um, so again, so from this angle, I wanted to show you that. And then I don't really need to keep throwing, but
Yeah.
that's about as much as I might lean over. So if
Has
there's any other questions, yeah.
Yeah, there are a couple more questions, but one more question related to what you just said about different wheels. You did draw an illustration showing that, but has anyone ever shared with you after they've learned your way, your setup, that they've adapted and done with their current wheel? No? Okay, so people, let's do that now. Let's give her content for her next presentation. We have to set up our wheels that way. Moving on to the next question. What material have you used for the cushions and the foam? Is it upholstery foam?
Yeah, just upholstery foam. So let me move that back over. And it's pretty sure it is equivalent to what John had made his out of. So so behind here is just a piece of wood. There you can kind of see. Um,
And
I
they're
worked with
cool, right? They're like set pretty well.
yes. So that's what I was going to say. That I worked with my husband to figure out what angle felt comfortable to me, and then we worked, figured out what height on the wall this should be, how far apart these should be. Is going to be a little bit different for everybody. This is when, again, we're all proportioned differently.
Yeah.
So I have in my PSA my husband's kind of schematic of this, which looks a little intimidating, I admit. But if you have questions about that, if you go to build it or ask somebody to build it, you're welcome to email me. Um, so
Orders?
then, what?
I was just joking. I said, is he taking orders for?
I thought I knew that was going to come up. At one point, when I was teaching online classes, we talked about communicating to John. John passed away. I don't 2017. I've lost track now. If I did ever manufacture them, I wanted to contact his wife to because I would want his name associated with it. But my husband is a woodworker and artist, and we're both like, we just didn't want to do it. And again, this is really unfortunate that something like this hasn't been manufactured. Um, I guess it just this is why talking about it, sharing. I mean, I think kind of every year I share the PSA that I wrote in 2018 about this, and I actually leave off the years that John's articles were written because people think that something from the 80s and 90s isn't relevant anymore, and
I
it
tell you,
can't be more relevant.
as I was typing in the chat box, I did write the years, but I was like, I just hope that people don't think that just because it was written in the 87 or 2001 that it's irrelevant. It is so, so important.
That's what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So this is just a piece of wood, and then there's upholstery foam, and this is vinyl, because that makes sense for it doesn't really get dirty, but for cleanup, so it's just easy to clean up, and then you can pick whatever color you'd like. Um, so yeah, that's that. Any other questions while I'm
Yes,
standing here?
a couple of more questions. Any specific angle for the back cushion? I know you said that in the drawing you have the angles and it's based on comfort and stuff. But I have a question related, like if you want to add more to that. Um, I have a question about the a floor pedal angle. It's
That, yeah. Okay, so back up here, um, John talks a little bit about this, and he also has a diagram in his articles. Um, I mean, I guess it's just, this roundness is just what really fits right here. And then the angle of this is just just so you lifts your butt. So it's just I don't know my angles to say. I mean, this to look at the back of this is actually slightly angled up versus being flat. Um, but that's I would say if you created these, then you could almost play with what angle would work for you. And when Trevor made this for me, he made it so that um, I could screw and unscrew it and play with it a little bit. And then once I decided what I liked, then I permanently screwed it. So you could kind of do a little bit of that. And then the oh, foot pedal um, was very much based on the angle of when the wheel's going, just whatever that negative space is where my right foot is, kind of mimicking that.
got it.
Um, so that might be specific. The Soldner pedal.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can show you what my pedal looks like. Can you see that? So see how it's chunky and it's the
Oh, I think we might have lost you. Kristen, can you hear me?
so again, that's just a little bit of playing with what you have, what works for you, what your body's like. But again, both of us have a little bit of a plan in our articles, if that helps.
Okay. Um, would it be too much if I ask if you can take the phone closer to the back phone thing and
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
close
Let's
up
see.
like that?
This is where I can't see what I'm doing.
There you go. Yes. Okay. So that's the part where you can see that you can change the angle slightly and then screw it back. Okay, I see.
Yeah, so these are the screws that hold that together. So this could shift a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I keep adding to the PSA. So when I have new questions or I'm happy to take better pictures and add that to my article if that's helpful. I keep trying to do stuff, adding to that there so that anything that can help. Yeah.
At this point, if anyone wants to unmute themselves and ask a question directly, you're welcome to do that. And I'm gonna go through the chat box also. I was paying too much attention to the demonstration and not reading.
That's okay.
So if anyone wants to unmute and come forward and ask a question, do so. Shika, welcome.
Hi, Kristen. Thank you so
Hi.
much for sharing this. I had a question about the wedge.
Yeah.
So I have been for the past 5 years. I have been throwing like standing up, and I use the back. I don't. I love your cushion thing. I haven't thought about it. I just have wedged myself between a wall and my wheel. So I use the wall for support, and I have like plush mats down at the bottom. So, but
Hmm.
what I noticed is my problem that happened was because I was resting one foot on the wheel, and one foot was kind of taking my weight, like because the
Yep.
foot on the wheel was constantly just it was constantly not taking the weight of my body, right? Because I was easing up on that because the pressure on the wheel was
Yep.
dictated by the foot. So I noticed I started having knee issues on the other foot. And
Hmm.
so I was wondering, like, when you put the wedge, does does your body then have equal weight? Because even then
Hmm.
you are easing up on your foot pedal and it's not the same weight that's going on your other foot. Does that hurt your knee sometimes?
It doesn't. Um, yeah, it is. It is slightly different, but my hips are still level. Again, because I have this, I'm able to soften my knees, so it isn't perfectly mimicked correct because where how fast you're going on the pedal makes this positioning a little bit different. Um, I would suggest that a backrest might help you, that having a lift might help you. I have worked in a situation where I did a residency for a month and wasn't going to ship my backrest to where I was doing the residency, and so was leaning on a wall, and I found it horribly uncomfortable because our bodies aren't flat. So yeah, I could see where having that foot, your left foot, just kind of weighted there, even with anti-fatigue mat or something like that. And that's when you could try doing what John did of flipping your pedal to your left foot. So that would help even things out a little bit.
So my
Um,
husband, sorry to interrupt, but my husband actually gave me a hand cranked pedal, like it is a.
oh, okay.
So that really helped. But
Mm-hmm.
just like you, when I go for workshops and I'm working all day, I can't take all that, and that's when I start feeling I'm
Mm-hmm.
missing that setup, and I'm really
Yeah.
dependent on that setup. So,
Yeah.
so do you ship everything every time you go for a workshop? Do you ship all your stuff?
No.
Or what? How do you manage like a? And do you feel it a toll on your body after?
Yes.
Oh, that's what I've been that's what I've been feeling.
Yes. I also have an article about teaching workshops, and I talk about it's like one sentence, but talk about how when you're away from what you're used to in your studio, you feel it, and that's one of the things I'm referring to. Yeah, I don't teach as many workshops as I used to, but definitely when I leave for 5 days or 2 week workshops, it's not. I don't like it. It really reinforces or reminds you how important this stuff is. Yeah. I mean, maybe there's some things that you could ship or take with you, but I never did. John did. When he taught workshops, he absolutely would. I don't know if I can't remember if he must have had an extra something or other that he would ship in advance or something, but he very much commanded that be available to him. Yeah,
Thank you so much.
you're welcome. Let me shift back over to so this is my, let's see. So this is my wedging table, which is about mid-thigh for me. And this is my decorating table, or where I spend most of my time. And this work table is about hip bone high. So theoretically, um, I can stand here and be pretty comfortable working, but I rarely stand to do things. But I wanted to talk about working heights are kind of important. So again, for the what I call the wedging table, that's where I roll slabs out, wedge, and then store things. And then here is where I'm mostly seated, working on a banding wheel. Let me turn this a little bit this way. Um, and then on the banding wheel, I wanted to show how these are bats that I had made probably 30 years ago, that are basically just countertop material. It's just formica. But they're ridiculous. They're, I used to think they were ridiculously thick, but now I love them because it's one of the ways that I raise things to work. So if I'm working on cups, I'll stack even more bats so that I'm working what I refer to as sternum height. So even if I'm seated, I'm pretty close to what I'm working on, and I'm really working right here. So in my PSA article, I also try to pay attention to and add when I see equipment or other potters doing things to work healthy. And so in the bottom of that PSA, one of the recent additions I made there was there you can buy a tabletop scissor lift. So that's super cool to elevate. So again, you're not hunched over. Caitlin Brennan is a Canadian potter who created, I think she calls it the potter's clamp. So it's a way to, if you're working on a cup, instead of holding the cup, which, this action of holding something is horrible for your thumb, creates strain down here. And then in addition to that, even a 1 pound cup, the weight of holding this while you're decorating or doing something adds strain to your neck. There's probably a poundage amount of like this how far away this is from your body, how much that is actually is on your neck. So anyway, her potter's clamp allows you to just clamp your cup on an angle to the table so that you can decorate so you're not holding something. So I'm always trying to do things so I'm not holding things, I'm not hunched over. That's super important part of my practice as well. So this is the one banding wheel that I have. And then for other things that are like my wall pillows, I have the shorter one. And then instead of buying multiple heights of banding wheels, doing this allows me to make them taller. I've definitely done workshops where I just pop a short banding wheel on top of a bucket, just anything to elevate that so I'm not hunched over. Again, I have so many friends that have had neck surgery or have neck issues, kind of upper spine issues from this activity. And if you can't make things taller, another thing is to make yourself shorter. So having, maybe a couple of different height stools can more maybe inexpensively solve that issue. But just kind of pay attention to how it feels while you're working. Um,
Kristen, I have two questions.
mhm.
It's asking if you could share any wedging technique that works well. What alternative works well for um, wedging ergonomically? And then the second question is from Juan. Juan, before I read your question, I just wanted to show you I have chai in your mug today. Um, you mentioned exercises and stretches earlier. I'm curious about what exercises or stretches currently help or might prevent pain in the studio.
To the first question, there is no a healthy way of wedging. Um, to me, after being seated to throw, wedging is the worst thing that we do. And I only do the ram's head or the spiral. Those are the two ways that we wedge. The thing about wedging is to not wedge a lot all at once. So I mentioned my professor earlier, he would wedge hundreds of pounds of clay at a time. I mean, that's not relevant for me, but I used to wedge 30 balls of clay at a time and then throw 30 cups. I don't do that anymore. I used to do 10, now I do 5. So I'll wedge 5 balls of clay, then stand at my wheel to throw. I might throw 3 cups and then walk over here to get a drink of water and then go back. So that's what I was referring to about being purposefully inefficient. So as throwers, we have to wedge. but how much we wedge at a time is the issue. So repetitive anything is what causes injury. So being inefficient is what can help alleviate those issues. The other thing that I don't do anymore is wedge hard clay. So I used to kind of push through. There's moments, whether you work in your studio 10 hours a week or 30 hours a week, where you're ready, but your materials or something isn't set up and you do it anyway. We have to stop doing that. We're so much a part of hustle culture where we have to be um, as efficient as possible, be high production, all of that kind of stuff. And it's just, that's contradictory to being healthy. So that's my answer to that. I can show you how I wedge, but it's really breaking up how much you wedge at a time. And so, again, I used to push through wedging stiff clay and would feel it, and then same with throwing. So one of the things that I'm having to address, and I did it a little bit today, is I used to claw throw, or I still do, but really using my left hand to do a pull, and that puts a lot of strain, especially with hard clay, on this part of your thumb. So I'm trying to teach myself how I teach throwing is, kind of bridging this hand so that I'm not really relying on my thumb for that pressure. So I'm going through what I would tell all of you to constantly be evaluating. Oh, this hurts. I need to change something. So what I do now, I use standard brand clay, and their bags over the past few years have gotten super thin, so the clay dries out crazy readily. So I even have a post-it note on my door that says soak clay. So what I do when a bag of clay seems a little bit too stiff, I make sure there's no holes in the bag, pour in like a quarter, third of a cup of water, seal it, put it in the bucket, not over top of it, but all the way up to the edge for sometimes 24 hours is fine. Sometimes it takes 3 days, but that saturates it enough where it's throwable again. And that's alleviated a lot of discomfort for me, hands, wrists. So those are the things that that's a great example of the wedging, where my answer to throwing pain is standing, but wedging is just about how much you do it at a time, and having the material not be too hard. In terms of exercises, I would recommend to all of you Wellness for Makers on Instagram. Missy is a great advocate for artists to. She stretches, she talks about things. She has books and videos. And that my PSA was originally an interview with her. That's how that came about. I do. I'm not great at stretching. um, I've done yoga. That's the kind of thing that, like, you have to do what works for you. My husband used to be a power lifter, and so like I used to do, I do stomach exercises, kind of sit up things to help that core. I do, I have a circuit of doing weightlifting things so that I'm working on chest, latch, shoulders, especially my age, a woman of, doing weight bearing things is important for bones. Um, I don't have a great answer for what specific exercises would make you a more durable potter, but I do think it's important to exercise. And I walk as well. I have a dog now, so I'm walking again. And I ride a stationary bicycle, which I think helps my legs for standing to throw. But I do in my PSA, I talk about how exercise is important for being in our studios, definitely.
I have a couple of more questions.
Yeah.
Have you ever used a strong arm for centering large amounts of clay? And the second one is, does it get easier to center large amounts of clay while standing?
I don't know what a strong arm is, so I have not used it. Um, I would, this is when I don't know what large amount of clay means. So for me, the largest amount of clay I throw, I think is 5 pounds, but I make, not recently, but I can make 10-pound pots, but I stack them. So rather than throwing 10 pounds at a time to make a tall jar or something like that, I can't throw that efficiently enough to get it thin enough to what I want it to be. But because I know that's hard on my body, I would rather throw 2 5-pound sections and put them together, kind of underthrown, and then continue to throw. And that I'm able to get the thinness that I want more readily, and I'm not hard. It's not as hard on my body. So that's when how much clay you're working with, thinking about are there other techniques to get what you want. John used to throw, I mean, he would throw tall things. When I throw tall things, I do kind of have to step to the side of my wheel to even stand on bricks sometimes to get the height that I need. He threw large platters and so would stand to the side, I think, to do some things. So I can do what I need to do without changing very much. So I don't know if that answers the question. A couple other things I wanted, I talked about that I've additions or changes I've made in my studio. I think you can see that I have backer board tops. This is what goes behind, like if you tile your bathroom, this is what you tile on. Backer board is what I want to call it. It's like maybe a half-inch thick. So a few years ago, I took out all of the canvas that all my tables were wrapped in and put this down. And that makes my studio a lot less dusty, a lot healthier. I also added, I have an air purifier, which I can, it's called Rabbit Air. And I can't say throughout the year that I noticed it makes a difference. I have it turned off because when I turned my wheel on earlier, it kicked off. But when I changed the filters at the end of the year, I'm horrified at how much dust is in there. So that's another thing I would recommend. Oh, and when I glaze, I bought vinyl tablecloths. I cover these tables in when I glaze, so it's easy to clean up. I always do wet cleaning. I try not to create dust in my studio, so I don't sand things really. But by having the vinyl covers on the tables, that allows me to easily wipe up. And this stuff is pretty durable. I know some potters, depending on how wet work you do on them, have to be swapped out more often, but these have been down for 3 or 4 years. So those are, I mean, there's different kinds of health in the studio. So there's physical health, and then there's also just like being conscientious about the dust we create, wearing a respirator, all of those kinds of things I wanted to make sure I touched on as well. Any other questions? I have a couple things that I wanted to end that I was rereading John's articles that I wanted to make sure I talked about too. But if you guys have more questions, hit me up.
Question. I do have a comment. Your studio is so clean. I know you mentioned the air quality, the air purifier, all of those things, but still, it's so clean and organized. And uh, love your test tiles at the back.
Oh.
Just observation.
Yeah.
I think we have about 4 minutes left. If anyone has any question, we'll take one more quick question. And then I know you mentioned that you wanted to end on a couple of
Yeah,
notes.
they're super quick. Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
my studio, I keep my studio this clean because my studio is in my house. So, well, that's not the reason why. That's part of the reason why. I many years ago realized that, and I talk about this in my PSA, when I was in graduate school, it was cool to like throw and then rub your hands on your pants and walk around like peg pen where there's dust flying off your pants. I don't do that anymore. And I talk about the towels that I use because I've just realized how unhealthy that is. So my studio is this clean almost always. After I've glazed, I have to mop and stuff. But if I get clay on the floor, I try to mop it up quickly while it's wet, not dry. But I also have a little dog. I've had dogs on and off, and I want to keep it clean for them being on the floor. But yeah, I that's part of my personality too, that I like things to be organized. That helps alleviate stress for me. But I think that's important to, pay attention to, definitely. The couple things I just wanted to, in rereading John's article, this is so profound and so simple. Pain is not normal. It is not part of the process. I mean, why don't we talk about it that way? I mean, that's so important. I mean, anytime, I mean, I remember being sitting to throw. I definitely, when I teach people how to throw, I would sit with them so that they could see that kind of stuff. But if you stand up and you're like, oh, that's not right. You should not be experiencing pain regularly in your studio. Um, he says being a ceramic artist is industrial labor. We think about being in our studios being creative, we're making things, hopefully it's fun, it's challenging, but we're working. It's physical work. So I think that's important to keep in mind. And lastly, productivity is not the goal. So again, that's his way of, I say being purposefully inefficient. There's way too much. And I think COVID kind of shifted some thinking about like hustle culture and like, oh, taking some time, not being as efficient as possible is the healthiest thing to do. Oh, there's one other thing I wanted to mention. Um, Years ago, I don't know if it's still on, the Great Pottery Throwdown, that English, and I know there's a Canadian challenge pottery show. He's a lovely guy on that pottery throwdown thing, but he would say, if it doesn't hurt, you're not doing it right. And it makes me so mad. If it hurts, if it hurts, you shouldn't be doing it. So, that's the last thing I wanted to say. There should not be pain in your studio.
Wow, Kristen, I wrote down so many notes as you were talking, and I worked in a production studio for almost 6 years. I recently left that, and I wish someone had said this to me, the purposefully inefficient way or pain is not part of the process. I mean, we used to get 2 tons of clay delivered and used to leave bruises on my arms, just, carrying them.
Yeah,
And it's brutal. And I assume that was part of the way production works, and that's how
right.
it should be. And oh, this was so informative.
Oh, good.
So
If
very.
anybody has further questions, you're welcome to email me if I can help farther. And if people have questions, I'll try to add things to the article so that it's relevant for everybody. But I'm so happy to have been here and talk to you all, and I hope it helps. I hope I could just, if nothing else, just cheerlead you into working healthier. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for taking out time and sharing all of this with us. Thank you
Absolutely.
everyone for joining. This is recorded, so you will get a replay link soon. And I hope you have a wonderful Sunday. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Be
Bye.
safe. Be healthy.
Be healthy. Thank you.